I'm just using what I learned in university in other ways. It just kinda helps with keeping things in my mind. So I wanted to do that with Zelda because I just find it very fun. I'll be explaining the whole cosmological structure of the Zelda cosmology using quantum mechanics, more specifically quantum wave functions. So if that is of interest to you, I hope you enjoyed this. Anyway, to explain quantum wave function in layman's terms using Zelda lore, imagine the entire Legend of Zelda multiverse, not just the timeline splits like the adult, child, and fallen hero branches, but every possible weird variant, every decision Link could make, every possible outcome, and every item he could equip. Think of the universal wave function as a cosmic Zelda code that contains every possible state for every universe and timeline at once, with each world having a certain weight or coefficient, just like amplitudes in a quantum wave function. If you don't know what amplitudes are, okay, think about it like this. Imagine flipping a coin, but while it is spinning in the air, it is both heads and tails at the same time. In quantum physics, we say the coin is in a superposition. The possibilities are heads and tails. The amplitudes are the numbers assigned to heads and tails while the coin is spinning. In the normal world, we use percentages like a 50% chance of rain. In the quantum world, nature does not use percentages, it uses amplitudes. To turn an amplitude into a real-world percentage, you have to multiply the amplitude by itself, square it. If the amplitude for heads is 1 over the square root of 2, you multiply 1 over the square root of 2 by 1 over the square root of 2. The answer is 1/2, which means a 50% chance of getting heads. If you're wondering why we don't just use percentages, it's because it just doesn't work. Percentages can only be positive. You can't have a negative 50% chance of rain. But amplitudes can be positive, negative, or even imaginary numbers. Because they can be negative, two amplitudes can cancel each other out. Now that that's explained, we can get back to the Zelda explanation. When a pivotal event happens in Zelda, the timeline splits, and separate universes continue on different paths. In the quantum version, you haven't eliminated any universes. The universal Zelda wave function still contains all the different timelines at once. Now, being in a single timeline, like only playing through Twilight Princess's path for example, you only experience the collapsed wave function. Also, I know the child timeline ends currently with Four Swords Adventures, but I'm using Twilight Princess as the example because I know the vast majority of people have not played Four Swords. Anywho, what appears like a collapse, like only seeing one Zelda ending at a time for Ocarina of Time for example, is just our limited access to one thread, even though the whole multiverse, the full cosmic Zelda code, still includes every possibility, running in parallel, isolated. Each timeline you experience has its own collapsed version of the wave function. You only see the probabilities and states that make sense in your timeline, like the child era only having Majora's Mask and not Wind Waker events. The coefficients you notice locally change so the odds seem normal, like normalized to 100%, but that's just because you've been isolated into a particular save file of the Zelda multiverse. The true universal wave function still describes all possible Zeldas together, but each world only sees its local chunk. So in Zelda terms, the multiverse is the universal wave function. Each timeline is an isolated piece of that cosmic function, and your experience after a branching event is like your own collapsed Zelda adventure. It feels single-threaded, but in reality, the universe just split you off into that version, and you can't see the others, though they all continue in the universal code. Okay, so I talked about this a little bit, but I want to expand on it before ending. Zelda's cosmology doesn't just resemble the quantum many worlds interpretation. It incorporates a patchwork of multiverse models from real-world physics and science fiction, making the Zelda universe a great analogy playground for layered multiverse concepts. I talked about it a little bit earlier, but Zelda's split timelines, adult, child, fallen hero, you know the ones? They mirror the quantum many worlds interpretation. Every pivotal event branches reality, and each player or inhabitant can only experience one branch, which feels like a collapsed local wave function, even though the universal wave function, the entire Zelda multiverse, contains every possibility in parallel. The idea here is that each timeline is like a quantum world that's split off, but still exists somewhere in the ultimate Zelda multiverse. Exactly how in quantum mechanics, the universal wave function encompasses all realities, but any single observer finds themselves in one thread. Other multiverse theories in real physics, such as eternal inflation, predict an infinite space filled with bubbled universes, vast regions isolated from each other by cosmic expansion. Zelda's side stories or out-of-timeline games like Hyrule Warriors, as confirmed by producer Eiji Aonuma, provide a close analogy. Hyrule Warriors, though linked to the main series, is set in a separate dimension and doesn't interact directly with the main timeline, like a cosmological bubbled universe isolated from others but born from the same cosmic foundation. Each of these bubbles in Zelda canon has its own reality, history, and even rules in the case of Lorule, but can share characters, themes, or even portals under special conditions, reflecting theoretical bubble collisions in parallel universes. And I'm lumping Lorule into that space because in the encyclopedia it is separate from the rest of the cosmology on the map, it has its own bubble. But it gets even cooler in my opinion. Zelda's world contains not only branches and bubbles, but also pocket dimensions within a single universe or timeline. It's the same thing, timeline branches or universes. I'm just using the words interchangeably to satisfy both sides. Realms like Termina, Koholint's Island, the Sacred Realm, the Dark World, and the Twilight Realm serve as local pockets with unique physics, temporality, and magical rules. These are described as alternate realities, magical constructs, or dimensions spawned or sustained by metaphysical forces. In physics, similar concepts exist. Brain world and extra-dimensional models predict localized universes or domains within higher dimensional space. Zelda's dimensions are compact, self-contained, and often only accessible via gates or magical means. Paralleling pockets of five-dimensional space or brain universes in string theory. There's also the real theory where our universe could have more than 3 spatial dimensions. Some string theories suggest 9 or more, each curled up or hidden from low-dimensional beings. Zelda reflects this in the way certain realms intersect. The Light World, Dark World, and Twilight Realm are layered over the same geography but are inaccessible except through rifts or portals, mirroring how higher dimensions might exist stacked over our familiar world but be unreachable except under special circumstances. But there is one thing that's very special in particular. There's a passage in the Zelda Encyclopedia about demise, and I find it very fascinating. The Japanese text under the images refers to demise and the creation of a special space, hyperspace, or ikungan, by the power of evil, where Link must face off against the final boss. This concept is thematically connected to string theory and supersymmetry in that both suggest additional dimensions or spaces beyond our ordinary 3 spatial dimensions. In string theory, the universe is made up of many dimensions, compactified and invisible to everyday sight, somewhat like a hyperspace. In fiction, hyperspace is often modeled on these ideas, where special conditions or magical power allow access to or the creation of alternate higher dimensional spaces. The Zelda depiction of battlefields or realms being created or altered by immense magical power like that of demise is a narrative parallel to how higher dimensional spaces might be accessed or shaped in theoretical physics models. While it's not a literal application of string theory or supersymmetry, the analogy holds. The game treats the space as something that can be twisted or newly formed by cosmic forces, which strongly resembles how higher dimensional or supersymmetric hidden worlds are conceptualized in modern physics. That's just a fun fact. If you learned anything about Zelda or about astrophysics, awesome. If not, I never said I was a good teacher, so I give myself a pass. Alright, take care.